traders and market movers. This is The Pulse with Francine Lacqua.
Good morning and welcome to The Pulse. I'm Kriti Gupta in London. Before we dive into all the details, I want to just bring you some of that breaking news there. The Germany July IFO Business Confidence Index coming at an 87 reading. The estimate there was about 89. And this is really interesting because we're continuing to see that manufacturing weakness that we continue to see in Germany. It's been driving a lot of the data down. We saw it in the last 48 hours as well, showing up in the PMIs, not just the manufacturing, but in the services front as well. And remember, this is also coming in contrast when we're seeing that divergence over in the French market as well when you look at the PMI. So that's going to be something that we really dive into and look at throughout the rest of the show. We're going to be diving into the details of that report as well. We'll be speaking to the president of the IFO Institute, Clemens Fuest, joins us at around 9:20 UK time. So that's the bond story, the eco data story. But I think the top story that we have to really dive into is going to be what we're seeing in the stock market. I want to dive into some of the earnings movers, some of the earnings themes here, because automakers taking a very big beating. I'm going to make Stellantis the poster child for that. Down about 9% this morning. Now, they're talking about some weakness over in the States. They're talking about dealerships, excess supply that you were seeing across the board. We're going to dive into the pricing story, but it's not just the automakers. Luxury also taking quite the hit. Kering down about 7.5%. We know after those weaker numbers in LVMH earlier this week as well, they are not catching a break. And that China story really feeds into that as well. But there are some pockets of green. Unilever, for example, higher by about 6.3% that you are seeing this morning. They're talking about pricing. They're talking about margins, volume growth, a very different story to what you're seeing in Nestle. We're going to dive into that divergence as well. And lastly, we're going to be talking about the drug makers as well. Roche is one, higher by 2.7%. A lot of guidance beating, a lot of kind of entry into the obesity market. There's a lot to dive into on that front. And I think that's where we should go next. AstraZeneca, Sanofi, Roche, as I said, lifting forecasts for the entire year. They're really talking about blockbuster demand for some of their pipeline drugs. But then again, you see that mixed numbers coming out of the automakers, out of the luxury names and others. All of this showing up as red on the screen in the markets, despite some of the fundamentals. I want to get more from Bloomberg's Craig Tudell and Sam Fazeli from Bloomberg Intelligence, covering the automakers and the pharma separately. Now, we should just highlight this entire thing by saying the markets are down. The markets are down big. Risk sentiment is just falling off of a cliff. But I think I want to start with the pharma, because that's where you are seeing outperformers. You are seeing a little bit of green on the screen. Why, though?
Yes, so, Kriti, we've got 5 companies that have reported today, 2 in the U.S. last week. Novartis, and Johnson & Johnson. And it's all been about either an upgrade or a beat. Now, Johnson & Johnson, you could argue maybe it was a minor one, but they're all in the same boat. It's the result of pipelines delivering. You look at, for instance, AstraZeneca. They have a very strong quarter this year, and they've just raised their EPS guidance for the full year. The reality is that we've got strong pipelines coming through, and there's a lot more news flow that's coming for the rest of this year. You mentioned obesity for Roche. I think there's going to be a lot of focus on that. And into 2025, for all 3 companies that have reported this morning, it's going to be a big 6 to 12 months.
So we talked to the AstraZeneca and the Roche CEO in the last 2 hours in the last show, and a big focus was on pricing here, because you have this entrance into the obesity market. I'm going to kind of put the cancer drugs and the other pipeline on the side for a second. I think a lot of people want to know about the obesity story, and they really can't seem to have an answer on the pricing yet, because they're still developing some of the technology. What does that pricing story look like, especially when the likes of AstraZeneca and Roche are competing with the Novo Nordisk, Eli Lilly, and facing some of that kind of drug pricing pressure from the Biden administration and potentially a Kamala Harris administration in 2025?
Yeah, so let's just step back for a minute, though. Those products that AstraZeneca and Roche are developing are quite a few years away from the market. Of course, if they make it to market, and, time will tell. They still need to go. They're still in very early stage development. People aren't even 100% sure exactly how many patients were in the Roche trial that were relevant to the data that was read out. And that we'll find out in the second half. So they need to come to market. They need to come and compete in a world where you've got drugs that have been treating people for 10 years and longer because of diabetes. I'm talking about the Wegovy's and Zepbounds of this world from Novo and Lilly. There will be price declines because there's a lot of companies coming in with products, but the potential demand is so high that I think it's likely to be able to absorb all of that. And you're also likely to see a situation where people cycle between drugs.
Yeah.
They go for a weekly to get their weight down, and then they move to a monthly. So it's really too soon to tell. IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, is a problem, especially for companies that are developing small molecules.
Yeah, a really interesting dynamic. It's a similar dynamic that we're seeing actually in the auto space. So I am going to make this connection because if it's all about the pipeline, it's all about this kind of this staggered flow. Craig, I want to bring you into the story. This is what I feel like is showing up with Stellantis, with Roche as well. They're trying to get their models online. They're trying to do it quickly while dealing with some of those raw material costs as well. Margin pressures. Stellantis having very different numbers than Renault. Similar market reactions. Walk us through the dynamics in the auto space.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a normalization of the industry in terms of their ability to produce more and starting to run up against the limits of where the market is willing to digest all of that volume. And so we're seeing Renault having a strong first half in terms of profitability, but they were not growing on a volume basis. We have Stellantis overbuilding and really having issues with too much inventory, particularly in the U.S. market. I think we've seen that even at Nissan as well, a consistent thread between those two. And then you also have an issue of execution for some of these automakers. So Ford, real quality and warranty expense problems, and a real surprise there where we saw a run up in the stock, just on expectations of earnings really being strong and maybe following GM with a beat and a raise. Instead, it was a miss and a maintain outlook, and that's not going to go over well. And so I think even in the case of Renault, where you have relatively strong execution, when you look at the sort of broader space and sort of take away from the challenges being had, that it's going to be tough sledding. Maybe Renault takes it on the chin, even though they're performing better than some of these other companies. A
stock that we haven't talked about this morning has been ST Micro. I'm not going to ask you about that specifically, but in their earnings, they're talking about those lower sales to car makers. And I'm curious, though, if this is the start of longer pain. We've talked about that China weakness kind of reading in through the luxury space, German manufacturing. But the fact that the U.S. weakness is starting to show up, how persistent could that be?
Yeah, I think, globally, when you talk about just how ascendant the Chinese manufacturers have been, there needs to be room made for that, right? And so we're going to see companies like Nissan, like Renault, really have challenges with maintaining their position in the mass market. In the U.S., of course, there's real protectionism there where we don't have to worry about the Chinese coming because, the Trump administration didn't want that. The Biden administration doesn't want that. But it is a case where, we're probably close to peak and out of growth. And, some of these companies that are not doing well from a product perspective that made the wrong bets, 3-4 years ago, that's really coming home to roost. And I think we're seeing that particularly with Stellantis, some wrong moves on the product side.
Yeah, it's a fascinating conversation on both fronts, the automakers and the pharma. Two very different stories showing up in a risk-off day as well. Bloomberg's Craig Trudell and Sam Fazeli from Bloomberg Intelligence joining us to break down those key sectors. And as we talk about the consumer, we've got to talk about that disposable income. We've got to talk about where they're spending it. Apparently, not as much at the Olympics as one would think. Coming up, 6,000 staff preparing 40,000 meals each day. We're getting an exclusive look at the Olympic task of feeding the world's top athletes on the eve of the Paris Games. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to The Pulse. I'm Kriti Gupta in London. 100 years after last hosting the Olympics, Paris prepares to impress again with the show centered around the sun to officially open the Games, kicking off tomorrow night. Now, the sporting spectacle expected to bring in more than 10 billion euros for the French economy. Let's bring in our very own Caroline Conan on site in Paris, which I've got to say, with the best assignment, I think, of the year, joining us with a special guest. Caroline, over to you.
Kriti, it seems like all the CEOs are flying in at the moment. In fact, I am with one of them, Nathalie Bellon-Szabo. She is the CEO of Sodexo Live. You're attending the lunch with Elon Musk at the Élysée Palace today, are you?
Yes, I'm going to have lunch with Emmanuel Macron, and I was very pleased to welcome him in the biggest restaurant in the world, in the Olympics Village on Monday.
Great. So you are making the meals for the athletes. 15,000 athletes in the Olympic Village, 40,000 meals a day. How is that possible? What are they going to eat in order to win those competitions?
So we are doing for the 15,000 athletes the food. We are feeding them every day now in the Olympics Village. So we have 4 restaurants. One is French restaurant, one is a worldwide restaurant, one is a Asian restaurant, and one is African and Caribbean restaurant. So we have different recipes. 500 recipe has been made since 2 years for the athletes. We are there to help them to win a medal, you know, and that's our job. And also, we have a little part in the village of a French gastronomy with 3 chefs, Alexandre Mazia, Akram Belalal, and Amandine Chenio, so they can have a piece of gastronomy, French gastronomy. And we have a bakery.
Are they going to have access to daily croissants?
Yes, we have a bakery. We have baguette and we have croissant, pain au chocolat. And I can tell you, it's really, they like it a lot.
Don't the athletes rely heavily on meat, though? I mean, are these games going to be sustainable from a food point of view?
Yeah, first, the restaurant, it's a building restaurant. It's La Cité du Cinéma. So it's a building restaurant. We put the restaurant there. And in terms of local supplier, 80% of the food is coming from France and 25% is coming from 200 kilometers around Paris. And
Great.
Then they eat a lot, yes, like an athlete.
How do you actually adapt to all the different sports? Because I guess if you're doing fencing, if you're running the marathon, you're not exactly eating the same. How is that? How do you prepare for this?
There is a diversity of recipe, but you know they can have what they want. And if you are a judoka, you don't eat like athletics women, so they can help, you know, serve themselves, and so they can eat what they want.
Can you actually quantify the impact it could have on your business in the third quarter, for example?
Yes, the impact of the revenue is going to be 80 million. It's around 5% of the Sodexo Live revenue in the world.
But you're also very present internationally in the US. You're doing the Super Bowl, right?
Yes, we have 60% of our business is in the US. And we just did the Formula One racing. We did Indian Wells, and next year we're going to do the Super Bowl in New Orleans, in the Saint, which is you know, our client in the US.
Very quickly, you're a female CEO. You're practicing sports. If you were competing in one of these Olympic competitions, which sports would it be?
Swim. I'm swimming every week, 3 times a week, so maybe, but I will be in the swimming competition. But I'm not like an athlete, so I don't know I will win.
Very important to practice sports in order to keep fit, of course, but also to be a female leader. And with this, going back to you in London.
All right, Carolyn Conan speaking to the CEO of Sodexo, talking about some of the food dynamics. I got to say that interview made me very, very hungry. In the meantime, let's talk about what's coming up next. The day after Germany's PMI slumps, the IFO reports a fall in business confidence. We're going to dive into the details. We have the Institute's president joining us up next. This is Bloomberg. This is The Pulse. I'm Kriti Gupta in London. Now, German business confidence has dropped in July with the closely watched IFO reading coming in below all of the estimates. I want to go straight to the IFO Institute President Clemens Fuest joins the program. Clemens, this was not a great reading for a lot of the folks who were hoping that there would be that turnaround in some of the data. What happened here?
Yes, it wasn't a great reading. It was a setback. During the spring, we did see some signs of life from the German economy, but those seem to be disappearing at the moment, unfortunately. The reading is particularly bad in manufacturing, which is so important for the German economy. Companies are telling us they are simply lacking orders. So the current business situation is deteriorating, and there is a lot of pessimism regarding the coming months. And that in turn also impacts services, in particular those services that are close to manufacturing, like logistics, where we also have negative readings. So the overall outlook is rather bleak.
So what are we waiting here then for that boost? And Clemens, I'm going to connect it to just what we're seeing in the markets, and I don't expect you to comment on the markets, but we are seeing some real weakness in the automaker space as we talk about this market sell-off that we're seeing today across the continent. And a lot of that has a read-through from China. A lot of it has a read-through from even weak sales coming out of the States. What do we need in that German data to really turn or to see the growth that we're waiting for?
There certainly are various structural challenges that have been around for some time. So the car industry is in this transition to electric mobility. There's a lot of uncertainty as to whether value added will take place in Germany in this newly structured industry, because Germany has this comparative advantage in combustion, but not in electric cars. So that does create uncertainty. But then we have other factors in Germany. There is the perspective of increasing protectionism. So a lot of companies say, why should we produce in Germany if we can, if it's maybe safer to produce in the markets, in the US, to some extent also in China. Of course, China has its own issues. The workforce is declining in Germany, and there is a lot of uncertainty about decarbonization and the policy surrounding it. And on top of everything else, there is an increasing regulatory burden, partly coming from the EU, really. And these regulations are only now hitting the companies, and all of that keeps back investment.
So that's kind of the fiscal dynamics that you're seeing within Germany as well. Talk to us about how the interest rate story plays in here specifically. And you mentioned the kind of the weakness in the manufacturing sector. But when you square that with what you're seeing in the services number, which are also not looking too rosy, better than manufacturing, but again, not too rosy, how does the interest rate dynamics coming out of the ECB play into all this?
So declining interest rates would help, but what we see in markets is that there was a decline in market interest rates earlier in the year, and further cuts of the ECB interest rate are more or less priced in, at least 2 further cuts at the moment. So we would get more support from that front if the ECB decided to cut its rates more quickly. What's currently priced in is 1/4 percentage point in September and another in December. If the ECB does more, maybe as a reaction to this weak economic development, that might be a supporting factor, supporting not just manufacturing, but also construction, which is also very weak, has been weak for some time in Germany, construction in particular of apartments, of housing. So if there was a push from monetary policy, that would have a stabilizing effect. But is it coming? That, of course, depends on developments in the entire Eurozone, not just in Germany.
Well, Clemens, then when we talk about those developments in the Eurozone, how much of the geopolitical uncertainty may show up in these next 6 months based on what's going on in France? Perhaps instability in the UK helping out, what's going on in the States. Do you expect some of that sentiment to show up in the data very quickly?
I think, yes, this is part of the story we see in the data. A lot of companies are worried about protectionism in the US and the uncertainty surrounding the elections. Also uncertainty surrounding US commitment to guarantee security in Europe. All of this leads companies to wait with investments in Europe. At the moment, they are just considered as very risky.
Certainly something we're going to be watching a very, very close eye on. Clemens Fuest, always a pleasure to have you on the program. IFO Institute president, joining us there to walk us through some of the kind of weak data we got out of that IFO business survey. And we should mention a bit into the boon market off of that fairly weak data. What we were expecting a bit of a pickup, and we did not get that. Also seeing some weak data when it comes to some of the earnings reports you were seeing across the continent. Of course, the automakers and that weakness that Clemens was just talking about really showing up in the likes of Stellantis, in Renault, in Nissan, across the board, really saying the pricing from China, the demand from China also playing in addition to some weak demand out of the States as well. You've also got weakness coming out of Kering in the luxury sector, so weighing on the French market as well. Some spots of green over in Unilever, kind of outperforming on the pricing space. And then, of course, some spots in Roche as well, coming up with their drug pipeline higher by 2% on those shares. Coming up on the program, we wrap a week in UK politics. Keir Starmer facing his first PMQs, and Rachel Reeves making her first foreign trip as chancellor. More coming up. This is Bloomberg.